Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is our special Board of Health meeting. I would like first to remind you again, we're web streamed and we're televised. You're well aware of that. Phones are in silence mode, I think. Yes, mine is. Our regrets have been sent, regrets have been sent from our camera volunteers for tonight's meeting. You can see that we're wearing green on our lapels this afternoon. I'm going to take a moment just to touch on that, if I may, before we get on with the Board of Health. So please bear with me just for about 1 minute. If you travel east from Saskatoon on Highway 5 for about an hour, you will hit the intersection of 5 and Highway 20. And when you get there, you are in downtown Humboldt, Saskatchewan. Their council has 1 mayor and 6 councillors. Their population is 5,870. And as you travel along, there are 2 highways near this intersection. You will pass a Tim Hortons, a McDonald's, a Canadian Tire, a Boston Pizza, a Dairy Queen, and I won't list them all. Sound familiar? Some of you are as old as I am, I think. Yes. And you're well aware that this is the town from which the former NHL goaltender for Chicago, Glenn Hall, was born, raised here, and farmed here. Hockey teams often help bring communities together. As you know, last week, tragedy hit this community. A transport truck collided with a coach line bus carrying the local junior hockey team to a playoff game. You've seen it on the news. The crash site looked like a jetliner had fallen from the sky. 15 have died. 14 were hospitalized. 2 were released. 12 remain in hospital, 4 in critical condition, 4 remain in serious condition, and 4 are in stable condition as of this morning. Norfolk County employees are asked to wear sports jerseys to work this Thursday, and there's some here this evening. I'm going to also ask staff to raise our flag on the front of the town hall to half-mast Thursday. And as well, I will be writing a letter to Mayor Bob in Humboldt on behalf of this council and the citizens of our community. This could have been our community. It could have been any community, and it certainly could have been our community, Norfolk. I think the Broncos were probably the pride of Humboldt, as many sports teams are in small communities. I think we should raise ourselves out of our seat and stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. Please be seated. Let's begin our special Board of Health meeting for April the 10th. There are no changes to the agenda. I would like to then declare that Mr. Oliver has moved and Mr. Sonnenberg has seconded that the special Board of Health agenda be approved as presented. Could I have a show of hands to confirm that? That is carried. Thank you. I'm quite pleased to see that the clock has been repaired and is back on the wall. It's been moved by Councilor Geisen, seconded by Councilor Oliver, that the Board of Health move into closed session at 2:36 PM to discuss matters pursuant to Section 239-2 of the Municipal Act 2001 SO 2001 C25 as amended, as the subject matter pertains to personnel matters about identifiable individuals, including municipal or local board employees. Those in favor of going in closed session, that is carried. Thank you. My guess is 15 minutes. I'll call our meeting back to order. Thank you, sir. Mr. Columbus has moved and Mr. Oliver has seconded that the Board of Health reconvene in open session at 2:46 p.m. Those in favor? Thank you. We are now reconvened in open session. As a result of closed session, I have the following resolution for your consideration. It's been moved by Mr. Oliver and seconded by Mr. Columbus that staff report HSS 1825, Medical Officer of Health appointments, be received as information, and that the Board of Health appoint Dr. Elizabeth Yerbanki as the interim acting Medical Officer of Health from April the 19th, 2018 to September the 30th, 2018, until the commencement date of October 1st, 2018, of Dr. Shankar Nasarthare as the full-time acting Medical Officer of Health. Dr. Shankar Nasthare. And further, that the Board of Health direct staff to notify the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care, Deputy Minister of Promotion and Public Health Division, and the Chief Medical Officer of Health of the appointment of Dr. Elizabeth Yerbanki as the interim MOH. Discussion. Councillor Wells.
Just a quick question, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, in the past, we've had an acting medical officer of health. Why have we gone from an acting medical officer of health to a permanent medical officer of health, please?
Well, I could answer that, but I know you can do it much better. No, you can do it much better than I will.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. We have had an acting medical officer of health because we have been in an agreement with the Brant County Health Unit, and we've shared our medical officer of health. So he is the appointed medical officer of health in Brant County through the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care and the respective minister, and has then been appointed by this board to be our acting medical officer of health until such a time when the incumbent is appointed by the minister. He or she remains as the acting medical officer of health. With that appointment, they will become the permanent full-time medical officer of health for Haldimand and Norfolk.
Yes.
Did we have any choice as to whether or not we needed and could have the option of having a medical officer of health? That's really my question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through Councillor Wells. As the board will recall, this was a direction that was a recommendation through our health audit that commenced in July of 2015, and one of the recommendations was the direction for staff and the board to secure a full-time medical officer of health.
And Mr. Wells, I also want to add that you will recall that I was directed by this board one or two times, maybe three, to ask that we be an exception to their policies, and that the sharing of Haldimand Norfolk with Brant was working quite well and would be a great savings to the taxpayers of Ontario. And I was at a few sessions of the audit last year, and as Marlene has said, of all of the items that were brought to our attention that needed to be addressed, there was just no leeway whatsoever. You follow their rules. You have to play the game the way they want it. So here we are. Any other discussion? That's a good question, by the way. If not, those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And I would just finish before I go to the confirming, to other business, and then the confirming bylaw. Our clerk is handing out the release for these appointments. First of all, Dr. Nasare, who will be our new MOH and begin on October 1st of this year, he currently is at two hospitals in Hamilton. He's the chief of department for two hospitals, Hamilton Health Services and the St. Joseph Healthcare in Hamilton. He also is a medical director at the Hamilton Health Services and a professor and division director at McMaster University's Department of Medicine. He is a graduate, has his master's from Harvard in public health, so we feel most fortunate to have hired this doctor. And the interim appointment of Dr. Elizabeth Yerbanki, who will begin next week. She is currently the Chief of Emergency Medicine at the Woodstock Hospital, of course, in Oxford County, as well as their investigating coroner, and she has previously held an acting MOH position for Oxford County Public Health. Is there any other business to come before the board? I want to thank all of you for coming in early again today to deal with this important matter before we start our council meeting in about 8 or 9 minutes. Been moved by Mr. Sonnenberg, seconded by Mr. Height, that bylaw 2018-06BH, this being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Board of Health for the Haldeman Norfolk Health Unit at this Board of Health meeting held on the 3rd day of April. I think that's probably should say the 10th. No, it's okay. That's why I'm here. This 10th day of April 2018 be passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, and affixed by the corporate seal. Those in favor? See you back here at 3 o'clock. Thank you. Sorry about that. I should read it before I read it out loud. No harm. No harm. No harm whatsoever. I wonder how much hours of staff time went into that. They worked very hard. You know, I know what it's like just to interview for a teacher.
So,
Thank you, Chief.
here's the thing.
What's the thing? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I make the time just a little after 3 p.m. It is April 10th. It's our council meeting for Norfolk County. As I mentioned at our Board of Health meeting a while ago, that certainly we are televised and web streamed, and if you do have a cell phone that makes a lot of noise, if you could silence it, check it at this time, that would be very much appreciated. Your agenda is in front of you. We are going to proceed through as much of this agenda as we can get through prior to 4 o'clock p.m. And at that time, we'll address the motion to reconsider, which has been advanced by Councillor Columbus. We will then go to our public hearings, which begin at 5 o'clock today, as usual. Too many sheets here, too many different meetings on the same afternoon. As I mentioned, there are no changes to the agenda, so our first order of business, it's been moved by Councillor Geisens and seconded by Councillor Wells, that the agenda be approved as presented. Discussion? Those in favor? We will follow this agenda for the evening. That's carried. Thank you. We do have a ceremonial activity. I guess I should ask if there's any disclosure of pecuniary interest to declare on this evening's agenda first. Any disclosures? Noted that none were declared. Okay, so we do have ceremonial activity. Mr. John B. Lee, our poet laureate, is no stranger. He is here again. This is the Mayor's Poetry Challenge that is brought forward every month of April across Canada. And Mr. Lee, you certainly can come to the microphone and push the blue button that says talk. And it's my understanding, Mr. Lee, that you are reading your poem Bonfire, which is in honor of Dr. John McCrae, and of course, he needs no introduction. He is the author of In Flanders Fields. So, welcome, Mr. Lee, and thank you again for your time and the work you do. And I'll turn things over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mayor Luke, and councillors and members of the public for this annual opportunity to read a poem as part of the Mayor's Challenge. April is officially Poetry Month, and the Mayor's Challenge is given out to poets laureate across the country in communities such as Toronto and Ottawa and Calgary and Vancouver that also have poets laureate. As the poets laureate of Norfolk County, it is my pleasure to announce an event on Thursday, and I take this opportunity to promote that event. This being the 100th anniversary this year, 2018 being the 100th anniversary of the armistice, the November 11th treaty of November 11th, 1918, to end the war, to end all wars. I and Heather King at the library in Port Dover conceived of and are hosting an event on Thursday evening at 7 p.m. dedicated to the idea of peace in the world, which is something that right now in our current and turbulent times is an important theme to remind ourselves of. There are 4 guests in attendance: the Poet Laureate of Canada, George Eliot Clark, who is a friend of mine and with whom I've collaborated on a book that will be presented that night. He will be in attendance. Michael Shotty, world-class blues guitarist, virtuoso guitarist, will be performing. He's performed in the past, and Ian Bell will be performing, and I can tell you that most of you know Ian Bell. He's in Norfolk. He's famous in Norfolk and across the country as a performer. When he first saw Michael Chate perform, his jaw dropped because Michael is such a fine guitarist. And Mayor Luke, you've seen Michael at the last event. And finally, Richard Ty Grove, the publisher of that book, and someone with local connections will be also reading that night. It starts at 7, will be finished by around 8:15, and I invite you to please think about coming out that night, not just to support the idea of peace in the world, which is an important theme, but to have a very entertaining and wonderful evening. There are ballots at each of the 5 libraries where people can go and fill in a trivia question. And the trivia question is an answer to this question. We all know John McCrae, the doctor who wrote the wonderful poem In Flanders Fields. Many of us have memorized it, but few of us know the name of his horse. When John McCrae lost his friend and wrote that poem after the Second Battle of Ypres, it was said of John that he rode his horse in the countryside in a melancholy mood, his horse Bonfire. And when the funeral was held for John McCrae, as is traditional with military funerals, the horse had a saddle, the saddle was empty, and the boots were facing the reverse. So John McCrae's horse name is Bonfire. The question in the library is, what is the name of John McCrae's horse? And the poem that I'm about to read is a poem called Bonfire that's been published in several locations. It's my poem, and I read it here in honor of peace in the world, and lest we forget. And the most important phrase to me from the First World War and the end of the First World War is the phrase, never again. Warfare, it seems to me, is always a failure of the human imagination. Bonfire. And this is about the funeral and the horse with the saddle that's empty and the boots facing backwards, the day that John McCrae was mourned by the nation. Bonfire. The mind is soaked in the fallen soldier's sorrowful story. Like dipping a book into gray-paged water, there in the memory of weeping ink, only the sound of one sad horse plodding unheard under the shadow saddle of a weightless rider. A lugubrious clip-clop gone silent, but for the quietness of imaginary war. Endless everywhere. The absent master sits where he drifts in the light like smoke above burning, his empty boots facing away from the main as though they remained at the foot of his bed, where he dreams on in timeless repose over unmeasured reams of moonlit darkness. His mount turned to stone in a vanishing orchard of shade, where he grazes on grass jeweled with dew. See where he sips at the blackening pool of the soul of the man he has lost in an autumn of strangers, when evening falls early and soon, and then in the hoarfrost of morning with its white glazed grasses of dawn. We are late to remember the losses of gloaming, and lest we forget. We lived and were loved in a short-lived blue, but for the woe of one horse called forever, with his sad fardel of funereal grief. Know that he carries us all to the sun like a lake in a shivering landscape of rain. Thank you. Remember, the question is, what is the name of John McCrae's horse? The poem is called Bonfire. Bonfire was John McCrae's horse. And please do feel free to come out on Thursday evening at 7 p.m. for a wonderful evening of poetry and music that will be amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Wow, very nice. Thank you. Any questions for our presenter? If not, I would like to thank you, and I certainly will see you Thursday at 7 o'clock.
See you Thursday. Bye.
Thank you, sir. We have no closed session this evening, so we'll go to item 5 on our agenda, the council meeting minutes of February the 27th are on page 5. These were deferred from March 27, and along with that, under separate cover were the closed session minutes from February the 27th. And also on page 23, our council meeting minutes from March 27th, our last council meeting. Is there anything you wish to bring to our attention in those minutes? Hearing nothing from council, I will declare that we adopt those minutes as they are printed. Okay, item number 6 is communications. We only have one this evening from Julianne Kachaki, South Coast Jazz. This is a request for LCBO for designation as an event of municipal significance. Anybody wish to talk about this, or I'll go right to the motion? Okay. As it is a communication item, Councillor Wells has moved, Councillor Geisens has seconded that the request of Julianne Kachaki, South Coast Jazz, be approved pending receipts of all other required approvals and be deemed a municipally significant event. Discussion. Those in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Let's move on to reports of committees. I am on page 41. Last week, we had a council and committee meeting. It has been moved by Councillor Geisens and seconded by Councillor Wells that the open and closed session minutes of the council and committee meeting of April the 3rd, 2018 be approved as presented, except resolution number 12 respecting staff report PW 1825 roadside cutting policy. It has been pulled for further discussion, which we will get to very shortly. With the exception of resolution 12, any discussion? Councillor Wells in Columbus, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I was not here at that meeting, and I wonder if it's still all right for me to second that motion, even though I was not here at this meeting.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
The main thing is you're here now.
Thank you.
Or should I say for now?
Thank you.
Any discussion? Those in favor? Oh, sorry, Councillor Columbus. My
Yes,
apologies.
Mr.
I'm
Mayor,
looking for my sheet.
on behalf of the Ag Advisory Board, it's on page 43, that the deputation of Dusty Zamenhof respecting bunkhouses be received as information. We did give direction to go further than that, but there's nothing listed here. So when is that direction covered off? There was a couple motions that were passed by the Ag Advisory Board, which we're dealing with tonight. And when do we give that direction for you to pursue speaking with the minister?
I was in the clerk's office this morning regarding writing of the letter that was discussed, but I'll let the clerk or the county man, the CAO respond.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly there was a direction provided to the mayor to draft a letter, and I believe the deputy clerk's assisting with that letter right
She
now.
is.
So it will go out, but if you do desire to pass a formal motion when we get to the advisory committee minutes, you could do that as well, but I do understand now that it's being advanced.
Yes, our deputy clerk is drafting the letter. I should have it tomorrow. And I will get a copy of that for the information package as well. Thank you, Councillor Columbus. Any other discussion? Councillor Height, please.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. On page 46, I wasn't in attendance for this one, but the second from the bottom paragraph, it says, "And that council directs staff to discontinue any word associated with the potential acquisition of 404 Main Street." Discontinue any word.
I think word is the wrong word. Yeah. It should be work, not word. Thank
That
you
makes
for picking
sense.
that up. That makes it a lot better. Thank you for that. I'm glad you got that. We can do lots of work otherwise, but no word. Thank you, Councillor Height. Appreciate it. Anything else? You've heard the motion to adopt the minutes, accept Resolution 12. Those in favor? It's carried. Okay, I have I don't have a resolution, but I have a mover. I'll need a seconder in a moment, but I'll tell you what I need a seconder for. Councillor Black, you're down as the mover. That resolution number 12 of the CIC minutes of April the 3rd, 2018, respecting roadside cutting, be referred back to the May 1st. Back to the May 1st. Be referred to the May 1st, 2018 CIC meeting to allow for a deputation prior to council consideration, correct? I'll need a seconder to deal with this resolution on roadside cutting. Councillor Oliver. So now we have a resolution to deal with number 12, discussion. Councillor Black?
I was contacted by Bernie Solomar and Stuart McKenzie. Stuart wasn't able to attend, he's out of the country, and wondered if you'd have an opportunity to address council once again on this issue. And that's why the deferral is there.
Thank you. Councillor Oliver?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was willing to second Councillor Black's motion in order to hear the rationale. If I could, Councillor Black,
Yes.
Did they give you any indication about what it was in our revised policy that we recommended approval at that they still don't like or that they don't like? Because we did make some changes to address things like monarchs, et cetera.
No, they didn't. It's just that I guess he was disappointed that some of his concerns were not addressed in it, and thought that maybe it was something that council missed, or so just to come to council and point that out, I guess.
Any other discussion? I've read the motion. I'll call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? The motion is defeated. Resolution 12 is on the top of page 45, as it was passed by CIC last week. I will need a mover to get this approved by Council Geisens and seconded by Councillor Columbus. The PW 18.5 roadside grass mowing policy review be received as information, and that Norfolk County's roadside grass mowing policy be revised to include the recommendations that were contained in Report 1825. Discussion on this. Oh, you've got it already? Oh, man. You wrote it faster than I could read it. No discussion. Those in favor? Opposed? That one is carried. Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Black. Continue with reports of committees. Page 49, Tourism and Economic Development Advisory Board minutes. It's been moved by Councillor Height and seconded by Councillor Sonnenberg that the minutes of the Tourism and Economic Development Advisory Board of February the 26th, 2018 be received as information. Are there any questions, comments? Councillor Columbus?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple questions with respect to this report. It's the bottom of page 50 of the agenda package under new business, the municipal accommodation tax.
Yes.
If it's what I think it is, could we get some clarification on what that is? And also, when do we expect the South Coast Business Coalition report to actually come forward? I've been getting questions about that.
Mr. Hoskins, first of all, the municipal accommodation tax, please.
Thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor Columbus, the municipal accommodation tax is the new legislation that the province of Ontario passed to allow municipalities, single tier and upper tier, to levy a tax on tourist accommodation. And that was mentioned in the press a few weeks ago, and at the time I believe council put it on their action items for staff to come back and report on that, and Mr. Johnson and I are supposed to meet and get a report back to you, so that's basically what that's about. And on the other matter,
The bottom of page 51, downtown revitalization, if I may, South Coast Business Coalition. Mr. Hoskins,
in terms of
please.
the South Coast Business Coalition, the last communication that we had was attendance at one of our advisory boards, and the indication we received was that there wouldn't be a report, but we can certainly contact them and find out if that's changed.
Thank you for that, Clark. This municipal accommodation tax, could we be wasting your time in putting this report together?
Through the mayor, yes, possibly. I think the cost of collecting the tax might outweigh the cost of the amount of money that would be collected. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? Tourism Economic Advisory minutes. Those in favor, receiving as information, opposed, carried. Page 53. Norfolk County Accessibility Advisory Committee minutes, moved by Councillor Sonnenberg, seconded by Councillor Height, that the minutes of the Accessibility Advisory Committee of February the 20th, 2018 be received as information. Any comments, questions on this report? Hearing none, those in favor? Carried. I'm now on page 55. Norfolk Heritage Committee minutes of January the 29th, moved by Sonnenberg, seconded by Geisens, that the minutes of the Norfolk Heritage Committee of January 29th, 2018 be received as information. Anything? Councillor Blunt.